See, I told you there were positive signs. I told you there was going to be a future for local news. So I'd like to begin, John, with you about the American Journalism Project and explain a little bit about why Knight Foundation made a decision to invest in what is a new approach to funding journalism. Because what the American Journalism Project does for philanthropy is it has created a philanthropic venture fund. So what does that mean? That means there's a vehicle where Knight Foundation and other foundations are investing dollars, and Knight Foundation's board approved $20 million over the next 5 years for this fund. The first $10 million is for the first raise, so it's applying the principles of venture capital. And Elizabeth Green, who is the mom of a brand new baby boy, and John just came together with this idea that venture capital has worked in the education reform movement. Okay, it has created a lot of charter schools that people don't like, but it became a very powerful vehicle to change the conversation about philanthropy. And that's what we need to do with journalism. We need people to understand that journalism is something that is so vital and important to our democracy that they must support it through membership, which is a form of philanthropy, and that foundations and other individuals must support it because it is so important to how people are informed in their communities. So I just wanted to wonder, John, if you could just tell us a little bit more about what makes the American Journalism Project different. It's not that you're just going to be re-granting to not-for-profits around the country. There's a real focus on delivering business and technology expertise and on generating revenue. And why is it important for a not-for-profit to generate revenue?
So one of the observations that Elizabeth and I had early on was, and we kind of had to check ourselves because it seemed too obvious to be true, but it seemed like the nonprofit news organizations that were growing had money. Okay, that seemed like a pretty interesting, pretty basic statement. But as it turned out, when you talk to people about this sector as a business, it wasn't as obvious to everybody as we felt like it was to us. Texas Tribune had the advantage of an upfront investment that allowed that team to hire revenue-producing people, and so guess what happened? They produced revenue. Chalkbeat had the ability, in lesser so, to hire revenue-producing people up front. Guess what happened? They produced revenue. Guess what happens with the revenue? Hires reporters.
Yes.
And so our only insight, if you will, and as I said, we've done precisely nothing yet, but our hypothesis is that if we can make smart grants to news organizations that have an aspiration to be entirely mission-driven, and really smart in terms of commercial sensibilities and really sophisticated in terms of philanthropic fundraising, that's a better way to grow news gathering spend than is giving organizations money to hire reporters. So that was kind of the fundamental insight, or again, hypothesis.
Now, Tasneem, excuse me, I already put it on the Twitter, so it's true. You are one of the most dynamic local news leaders that I've met. Your story and your approach is so compelling. What is it, as a newcomer to the not-for-profit news space, do you think that you need to be successful and to execute on your excellent vision for Tyler?
First, I'm just glad I have dark skin because I'm blushing like crazy. So Well, so I should say actually, in 2010, I joined the launch team of the Bay Citizen, and I went through that whole experience. I then went to Mother Jones Magazine, where I learned from the amazing Clara Jeffrey and Monica Bauerlein the importance of a diversified revenue stream. They were so good at like showing reporters, here's our pie, let's talk about our pie. Then I went to NPR. So I've spent a lot of time in nonprofit newsrooms. Now I'm trying to build my own from scratch. And that, you know, you guys are talking about not just investing in a newsroom, but investing in a newsroom's capacity to build itself. That's where I want to be. For my project to succeed in Tyler, it has to be of Tyler by Tyler. It can't feel like some people from out there are creating this thing in our community. It has to feel like it's people who care about Tyler and invest in Tyler are making it happen. And so that is like, that's where I want to be, but I know I can't get there right now by myself. My goal ultimately is to not need outside help, because that's not just a matter of business and pragmatism, but that's a matter of trust. That's a matter of my audience. I need to be able to tell that story about myself. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I certainly have a lot of ideas about what that would look like, but for me, it's somebody to help me figure out my membership strategy, somebody to help me figure out my event strategy, somebody to help me talk to the seasoned philanthropists that I need to talk to. Sometimes it's little things like, when do you send the thank you? When do you approach this person? If I just had someone I could talk to about this stuff, that would help.
Well, I'm so delighted that you're going to be joining the Institute for Not-for-Profit News, because one of the programs that Knight Foundation, Democracy Fund, the MacArthur Foundation, Ethics and Excellence, and others fund helps not-for-profit organizations learn how to do that through a matching gifts program called Newsmatch.
It's great.
So you will be part of Newsmatch in 2019, but Newsmatch is not just a matching gifts program at the end of December. It is, in fact, a whole pathway that you can start right now that will help you build that email list, that will help you build that database of individual donors and will guide you on how to really develop a successful fundraising campaign.
That's great.
Yeah. So Ryan, doubling, gosh, you've said so many smart things in your presentation. Where do we begin? Doubling the number of State House reporters. You talked about collaboration. So increasingly, as we see that it's very difficult to for a local news organization to support a newsroom of more than 200 people, collaboration does increase impact of reporting. And the way that you spoke about it, I thought was so important, that there are different types of collaboration. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. So the collaboration that we're doing with the local NBC affiliate just focuses on investigations. And so we produce 4 investigations over the course of 18 months, and some of those look the same, some of those look different. We're really using it as an opportunity to experiment with the form and think about what are our strengths and what are the strengths of local TV, and how can we combine them to do really impactful stories. But there are other TV stations, both in our market and throughout the state, who want to talk to us. Well, we know that the NBC affiliate is a fierce competitor with the ABC affiliate, right? We want to work with them both. And so we're having conversations with their competitors about, okay, maybe it's not that we do investigations. We're going to leave that with our collaboration with the NBC affiliate, but maybe there's a geographic region in your coverage area that you just can't get to. And so when news breaks, maybe we can send a reporter out there, get a little bit of video, and maybe we structure the collaboration that way. We're even talking to some local newspapers who are looking to hire reporters. After our Natchez event, the editor came up to me and said, we're looking to hire 2 people. Let us know if anybody has come across your radar who'd be good for us to hire. Well, what I want to do is be those reporters, right? Because we have a staff of 16. I can send a person to Natchez for a couple weeks and do anything that they need us to do. And down the line, maybe we talk about some sort of cost sharing, but we want to be a resource to our legacy media. And so we've had a lot of receptive conversations around those types of partnerships, but somebody's just got to pull the trigger on it. I mean, you can't always just keep the conversation going. Like somebody has to pick up the phone and make the thing happen. We think that Mississippi Today is the organization in Mississippi that can do that and probably needs to do it.
Thank you. And in Philadelphia, Jim, through the Solutions Journalism Network project on re-entry. So as a startup in Philadelphia, you had an opportunity to observe the lack of collaboration among many news organizations in Philadelphia. How did that Solutions Journalism Network approach and collaboration change?
Well, it took a while. I mean, I think when we showed up in Philadelphia, we weren't trying to put anybody else out of business. It wasn't our idea that we're going to come in here and we wanted to be part of the ecosystem. And what we tried to do is design where we thought we could fit a certain demographic we were going to go after. We were going after younger Philadelphians. We were aiming at that where we didn't think anybody was, but we knew that we couldn't do it on our own. And so we tried to, in all 3 of the cities, we tried to do a lot of partnerships, and we made more progress collectively with the Philadelphia project, where we were working with lots of other organizations to cover one issue. We also did a long reporting series with the Philly Inquirer on SEPTA, the transit system in Philly. And so, I mean, we did a lot of collaborations, but it's not easy. It doesn't come now. My argument, as a guy who spent a lot of his life in legacy media, it doesn't come naturally to collaborate with other people in legacy, especially if you're the biggest player in town. You still have this attitude that why would I want people who read me to find other people, which is, I think, insane, because any smart news consumer probably knows most of the sources in their market. But in Philly, it really worked out well. And I think one of the things that happens every time another Broken Philly meeting happens, people come back and they say, it's amazing how well this is going. I think everybody expected it to be a fight. It's like, let's get 19 news organizations to play nicely together. They probably had armed security at the first meeting.
Yeah, you end up with 10.
Yeah, you end up with 10, but they've all worked really well together. And every time that's always the reaction after every meeting, and it's going down now because I think people are now getting used to the fact that it's going to be fine. But it was really hard. But I really, as I said before, I think you have to look at a city as, if you look at it as like a roulette table, you have to have one chip on everything or 2 chips on some things, but you can't stack everything on 2 numbers like politics and high school sports. Because outside of that, there's 1,000 things that are not going to get covered at all. But that requires you to be willing to collaborate, and I think that's still the last hurdle.
And also figure out what it is that you're going to cover.
Yeah.
So we'd love to take questions from the audience because, oh my goodness.
I'm going to throw. Go. Oh.
I got it. My name is Lisa Cohen. I am at the Columbia Journalism School. I run the DuPont Columbia Awards, which is for audio and video. And I'm particularly interested, I think, Ryan, you talked about collaborations with local television stations. And we're seeing more and more of that in our entrants and in our winners. And I wanted to hear a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of how you go about doing that. Do you approach them? They approach you? How does it work?
Right. So the grant that we got from the Nave Foundation allowed us to hire a reporter who works with the chief investigative reporter at the NBC affiliate. What we did not want to do was for our reporter to do their piece and their reporter to do their piece, and they spin off a story, we spin off a story, and call it a collaboration. We also didn't want to go into it thinking that we were the smart newspaper people and they were the dumb TV people, and we were going to make their stories smarter. We recognized that, in terms of visual storytelling, there was a lot that we could also learn because we don't do video well. And so, what we've learned is that there's a lot of value in experimentation. There's, probably some thought that should have gone in on some of the front end. I mean, I feel like sometimes that the local TV reporter, we're asking their station to let them come over and play with us because, you know, we hired the reporter. And so we need to think through some of those things and who's paying for FOIAs and who's paying for travel and that kind of stuff. And so we've worked it out, but it's really been a learning experience.
There's one here.
Thank you. My name is Gabriela Vivanco. I work at a newspaper group in Ecuador. There's a lot of people in the audience from different parts of Latin America, and it is an issue in our countries about philanthropy because it's not as strong or sort of sophisticated as it is in the U.S. And so I wanted to get your input. I know, Jim, you mentioned about culture or other things that you expect to see as more traditional media companies transition into a diversified revenue stream. What are the things that you have seen that work within the company or the necessary steps that are urgent or need to be taken for media companies to become more sustainable over time?
So I can just like jump in and just tell you we have a very successful program here in the U.S. It's called the Table Stakes Program, and Neil Chase, who is sitting right behind you, can tell you a little bit more about it. And it's an effort to bring and address culture change in legacy news organizations to really address the biggest challenge of all, which is strategic alignment. And as Jim said, the culture change issues.
Yeah, I would just add one thing is the 10 things I had on my slide. If the culture doesn't change, almost none of those things can happen. I mean, everything is downstream of culture change. And I think if there's, you know, if your culture's not changing fast enough, if you don't have a fair amount of pissed off, uncomfortable people.
And as a Latin American and a person who has been working in the last 20 plus years of helping Latin American journalism, I can tell you that the fact that we don't have a philanthropy tradition there, it doesn't mean that we are not going to have. You know, many things that people say in Latin America for years, oh, this is gringo thing, here is not going to work. We are seeing actually a proliferation of non-profits in Latin America, and there is hope. And there is the great work of Sembra Media that we're going to hear about this afternoon. So there are things happening. There's one there. Oh. And then.
I am Christian from Colombia, local journalist. In the world news deserts grow. If journalism is a public service, should public funds fund local journalists?
Should the government?
Governments.
Yeah, that's a good question. No?
Sure.
No problem.
Decided in the commission not to focus on government.
Yeah. I've become fond of saying should and other people's money don't belong in the same sentence very, very easily, or shouldn't. Whoops. Personal belief, I believe in the United States. To me, the bigger question is, what is your society value? And we in the United States have gotten ourselves into a pickle because what we thought we valued, we kind of don't now, and we don't know what to do about it. And so in the fullness of time, I think there does have to be a public policy shift. I'm not familiar with public policy in your country, but it's in the U.S., it's just out of step with commercial realities. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen in this administration. I don't even know what I'd do if I were God exactly. But what we do think is that in the interim, these organizations need to get sharper commercially, and philanthropy's got to take up a lot of the slack.
Jennifer, last question.
My question is for Tasneem. I was wondering if you could tell us what slides we missed.
No, she went back.
I'll post them. I'll post them.
Were there any major takeaways that we didn't get to see from your presentation?
Flip. No, I don't think so.
She came back. I mean, it's not my fault. One more question. Here.
So you were talking about fielding questions from the community. Can you tell me exactly how you fielded them, if you put something on your website or social media?
Yeah, I started just with digital distribution, just simple, right? Like, what's the lowest friction, lowest barrier to entry? It was started with just email and Google Doc. Google Spreadsheets. I quickly understood that I'm only reaching my audience, which is it's a lot younger than the traditional media in town, which is great. But it's plugged in people, it's highly educated people, it's resourced people. So that's where a few months ago I started printing out copies of my survey and taking them with me to all different community groups. So that's the Getting Ahead program I talked about. That's I'm setting up a meeting with the Tyler Young Professionals Network. Just who are the different groups that aren't represented right now in my database, and where are they? They're out there. How do I make this easy for me and just go to their meetings? Like, go to other people's meetings. It's a really great way of getting their attention. Also, community meeting organizers love guest speakers because it's less work for them. So the groups I'm trying to meet, how are they currently organizing themselves? And how do I get an invitation to come be where they are? And don't do it digitally. If it makes sense to do it digitally with that group, do it. But I have just found the most value in paper printouts. And I don't just say, here's this thing, fill it out. We go and we make it a conversation. So it's, all right, here's my first question. In the last 12 months, what's an area, what's an information gap where not knowing something affected your quality of life in a bad way? I also ask a really important question. What do you wish other people better understood about Tyler? I get some of my best questions that way. So, sorry, go where they're at.
Okay, so thank you very much. This was a great panel.